My wife Jennifer died earlier this year. It feels like it happened yesterday. Not because of my memory of that day, but because I don't think I have truly lived a day since it happened. It's funny how much can change in a day. The morning had been like any other. Jennifer was feeding our newborn Molly, and I was humming along to the ink spots as I made us a breakfast omelet. Life was perfect. Yet as soon as Jennifer took a ponderous look at her hands and remarked how cold they were, it signified the end to my idyllic life. 24 hours later, I held one of those cold, lifeless hands as a doctor explained the spread and effect of sepsis. I learned a few hard lessons that day. I don't deal well with pity. I don't deal well with social gatherings, and I don't deal well financially. I hadn't realized how much I had relied on Jennifer for my well-being. Every social occasion felt suffocating. And I quickly realized my low salary as a data analyst was not enough to afford the mortgage payments for our suburban new build. When Jennifer's father threw a lifeline in offering use of his rarely used holiday home in northern Brittany, I gladly accepted. I couldn't wait to leave those pitying looks behind. It was only when me and Molly arrived at the house did I feel the first pang of apprehension. I knew the house was old, maybe 3 or 4 centuries by what Jennifer's father had said, but it looked almost medieval. The roof was sound but concaved like a lens. The chimneys at either side of the building seemed to be desperately clinging on to the main structure. These chimneys led to the only heating sources of the house. 2 grand fireplaces held aloft by large slabs of stone, which still bared the pickaxe marks from which it had been chiseled. The upper floor was supported by great beams of oak. Although still sturdy, they wore the scars of centuries of woodworm spots. Even after thorough cleaning, the creaky upstairs floorboards would still patter the lower floor with dust when walked upon. Yet for its quirks, I felt almost content. The small village the house was situated in was incredibly quiet, meaning me and Molly were rarely disturbed. One might have guessed by the multitudes of shuttered windows that it was a ghost town, yet the spell would be broken by the hourly bells of the central church, which seemed to act an auditory timetable for the locals, who would filter out of their homes to frequent the boulangerie or tabac in their daily rituals. In my brief visits out of the home, I noticed how aged the population was. I couldn't remember ever seeing anyone younger than their 30s. Not that I had much interaction with them. I couldn't even speak French, let alone Breton, and they always seemed to eye me with caution. Coincidentally, the only English-speaking person in the village was my neighbor, an old lady named Dorian who looked almost as ancient as the building itself lived in the house adjacent. Our first interaction had been odd. I'd just returned from the corner shop, Molly strapped to my front and shopping bag in hand, when as I put the keys in the door, I heard the clip-clop of wood on stone. I turned to face an old woman wearing clogs, donning a black and white modally dress with a frilly hat to match. Before I had a chance to greet her, she pointed a gnarled finger at Molly and in a thick Breton accent, croaked, "Is the baby yours?" "Yes, she is. Her name is Molly," I replied cautiously. I didn't just find her now. I regretted my attempt at joke as Dorian's face furrowed into a stern glare. "This is no place for a child," she said coldly. "This house," I said, gesturing to the building. "It looks a bit shabby from the outside, but it's actually quite cozy on the inside," and Dorian cut me off by wagging her finger. No, this place is too dangerous for the child. We are too close to the chaos." For a moment I was confused as to what she meant, but then I realized she was referencing the valley that bordered the west side of the village. The Bretons used the word chaos to describe an area of literal primordial geological chaos. The chaos next to the village, like many others in Brittany, is a winding valley filled with immense boulders and strange formations. These great rocks, some being larger than houses, are said to have been tumbled and shifted into place after great calamities. The ancient nature of these valleys has spawned countless myths of spirits and creatures who have roamed these areas before the age of man. This mystique, however, had always been lost on me. I wouldn't worry, I don't think Molly here is going to be wandering near those rocks anytime soon, I said, stroking her head as she began to stir. Dorian only shook her head. Her mother should be watchful. It's not what wanders in that one should worry, but what wanders out. Before I could query what she meant, Molly began to cry. Her mother is not with us anymore, I said quickly, feeling a sudden pang of anguish. I better get in and feed this one. It was nice to meet you. We exchanged names and I made my way inside. As I unpacked my shopping and began mixing up some baby formula, I felt my grief creep back into my psyche. I had been in Brittany 3 months, and I realized I hadn't thought of Jennifer at all this last week. Being so busy with work and taking care of Molly, I realized I hadn't had much time to think. Now I was left alone with my thoughts. I remembered how greatly I missed her. The small things that were absent hurt the most. The way I would catch her in a jumping embrace when she returned from work. The smell of her on my pillows, and the way she would sing Molly asleep. These small things that together form the love for a person. Now all I'm left with is a memory. Molly's cries woke me from my mournful trance. It's okay, Daddy is here, I said softly as I lifted the bottle to her mouth for her to feed. What am I going to do, Molly? I whispered as her mother's green eyes peered into mine. I sighed and pulled her closer to me. At least I'll always have you. As if feeling my torment, Molly giggled and gave me one big toothless smile. I smiled back. Okay, you little rascal, time for bed. Daddy has some more work to do. I took Molly up to my bedroom to her cot, which was nestled in the corner by the window. Sleep well, my little angel. I kissed her on the forehead and tucked her in. Downstairs in the sitting room, I kindled a fire, opened up my laptop, and returned to my work. I don't know how much time passed until I heard that first bump. I'd been wearing headphones, so I didn't know whether I had misheard at first. Then another and another. I shot to my feet as I heard Molly begin to wail. I heard what sounded like frantic footsteps echoing from upstairs. Molly! I shouted as I began bolting up the staircase and into the bedroom. I had expected something, anything, but as I burst into the room there was Molly, sound asleep in her cot. Had I imagined it? I stood in confusion as I felt a sudden breeze blow through the room. The window next to Molly's bed was slightly ajar. I was sure it hadn't been opened before. A low rumble of thunder emanated from the window. Rain began to patter quietly on the tiled roof. A strange tension filled me. I had never believed in ghosts, but this felt like something that a person who did believe in them would freak out about. Either way, whether it was a ghost or a rat, I suddenly felt very uncomfortable leaving Molly alone in that room. I carefully scooped Molly up from her cot and carried her back downstairs. She stirred as I entered the sitting room, and on sight of the baby milk bottle left on the side, she began incessantly reaching towards it. Still hungry, are we? I said to Molly as I laid her in the small crib by the sofa. Okay, just one more then. I hurried to the kitchen to create another mix. As I re-entered the sitting room, I could see her eyes were locked on the bottle with a strange intensity. Wow, you really like this stuff, huh? I reached down to feed her the bottle, but she practically snatched it away from me with dexterity I had never seen before, and began chugging the bottle down. Whoa, settle down there, sweetie, you'll get a bad tummy. I tried to pull the bottle away, but she had a vice-like grip on the bottle. In sheer disbelief, I watched as the entire bottle's contents disappear in 10 seconds. As soon as she finished, she let out a small burp and threw the bottle from her crib. "Jesus Christ, Molly, where did that come from?" I said in shock. I had never seen Molly act such a way, or any baby for a matter of fact. Molly's green eyes locked with mine. Another rumble of thunder permeated through the room. A wave of uncanniness washed over me. Something seemed off. Molly seemed off. I wasn't sure whether it was the strangeness of the evening that had got to me, but the way she looked at me so intently almost unnerved me. As if trying to make use of the sudden attention, Molly began mumbling, her first word. Molly had never attempted speech like this before. My unease began dissipating as I realized I was about to bear witness to a wonderful moment. "What is it, Molly?" "Daddy is listening," I whispered, worrying any noise would pop this bubble of discovery. Molly mumbled, the words almost breaking free. "Yes, Molly," I said in anticipation. "More," Molly said with a certain deliberation. A laugh escaped my breath. "More? Molly, my angel, you have just had a whole bottle." Molly's brows furrowed as if understanding. "More," she repeated with a sterner tone. "No, Molly, it's past your bedtime already. You don't need another bottle," I said, the concern creeping back into my voice. "More now!" Molly screamed as the first crack of lightning illuminated the room. She began flailing around manically in her crib. For a moment, I just sat there in disbelief. Molly was only 10 months old. It wasn't impossible for her to begin speaking at this age, but her comprehension of my words felt just as unnatural as her sudden appetite. Molly also had never had a tantrum like this before. Sure, she had cried and gotten upset, but she had never screamed bloody murder like this before. I conceded. I had tried to get her stopped by speaking to her, gently rocking her, even singing to her, but still, she screamed, demanding to be fed. I felt defeated as I began mixing her another bottle. Jennifer would have been able to remedy this, I thought to myself. But a rapping at the door broke me from my pitiful trance. It was Dorian, dressed in a white nightgown and fluffy slippers, which were slowly getting drenched by the intensifying rain. With a stony scowl plastered across her face, she spoke to me while incessantly pointing her finger inside. "Your child has kept me up this last hour." "Oh God, Dorian, I'm sorry," I spluttered out. "It's Molly. I don't know what has gotten into her. She won't stop eating and crying." Dorian pushed past me before I could finish. "Where is she?" she demanded. "Let me have a look at her." She didn't have to ask, she simply followed the sound of the wailing. I quickly followed, baby bottle in hand. "She's never been this food manic before," I said, handing the bottle to Molly, which quickly silenced her screaming. "This has just begun tonight," Dorian said, concern beginning to show in her face. Yes, and she even spoke her first words, only to ask for more food, I said as Molly began to polish off the last of the bottle. Dorian just shook her head. "I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this," she began, then paused. Dorian took one look at Molly discarding her third bottle, and then looked up at me. "This is not your child," she said plainly. "What the hell are you talking about?" I said in astonishment. "Children are rare here. They are sought after, craved by things often not human." Dorian leaned down and picked up Molly, who had begun to cry again. This is Yetin handiwork. I know many mothers who notice too late or refuse to accept. Months go by, food depletes, yet the baby is not grown. She looked down at Molly, who had begun to properly wail again. "She'll be deep within the chaos now. I did try to warn you," she sighed. A sudden anger had begun to well in me. That is my child you are holding. I don't know this Yaten and I don't like how you're referring to her. Give her back to me. I outstretched my arms expectantly. You don't believe me. Dorian chortled. Look, I'll show you. She suddenly began squeezing her thumb hard on Molly's temple. She began to scream even louder. I returned that scream and lunged towards her. But before I could reach her, I heard the audible pop of Molly's eye leaving her skull. Yet what dropped to the floor wasn't flesh. It bounced and rolled to my feet like a marble. In a moment where time seemed to freeze, I picked it up. It was a perfect porcelain eye, carved and etched better than any prosthetic I'd ever seen. I looked up to see a single-eyed Molly, her skin coating the inside of her socket like some badly treated doll. My stomach rolled over inside of me. What the hell is that thing? Speaking aloud what I was thinking. A changeling, a very deceiving fake and a cruel imitation of life. Dorian began indifferently as Molly began to flail against her. They are the creation of Yetin, foul and imperfect creatures who have only prevented the degeneration of their race through claiming the beautiful and whole. My mind began to race. The madness of the situation and the screams of Molly, or rather the changeling, had started to make my head throb. So where is the real Molly? I asked desperately. They'll have taken her to the caves under the chaos, Dorian said calmly as another lightning strike lit up her dark eyes. If you leave now, you might be able to get her before she's claimed. You'll need to bring this, she said, dangling the changeling in front of her. Even though I knew it wasn't human, my paternal instinct made me spring to grab the one-eyed baby and cradle it under my arm. What am I supposed to do with her? I asked, slightly unsettled by her handling of the child. You'll use her to bargain. They'll only reveal themselves to you that way. Your child will be of value to them, but not more than the tool they use to acquire her. These things require a lot to craft. She gestured to the door. Leave now. Go to the deepest level of the chaos. If she's still alive, you'll hear her cries to guide your way. I hope you have more luck than I did. With so much information to process and so little time, all I could utter to her was thank you, as I grabbed my coat and ran out into the storm. It was raining hard. The changeling cried incessantly. Even with my knowledge, I instinctively tried to shield it from the rain the best I could. The lights flicked on in some of the houses I ran past as I held the screaming child, and as the streetlights dissipated and the chaos unfolded in front of me, the only source of light would come from the inconsistent flashes of lightning that would illuminate the stone Goliaths I desperately clambered over. I was wading through the river of rock less than 5 minutes before I heard the first cries. Faint and whistled through the wind, I heard her, my baby girl. I quickened my pace in complete disregard for the unknown drops nestled between boulders. I leapt from rock to rock, clutching the imposter closely to my chest. Then I found it, a circular clearing which at its center held 3 great boulders, fallen into place to give the appearance of a great stone doorway leading into a black, endless abyss. A single cry echoed from the void. "Molly!" I shouted, but only thunder answered my call. I wish I brought a flashlight or a lighter, anything that would have let me see into that dark cavern. I had no way of seeing how deep or far it went. I didn't want to risk a fall unless there was no other option. I had to try, as Dorian said. "I have your child," I called out to the abyss, "and I know you have mine." No response. "I want to trade. I return what is yours and you return what is mine," I shouted. I could feel the desperation creeping into my voice. Again, I heard Molly's cries echo out from the dark. I laid the changeling out on the stone. Its porcelain eye glistened in the moonlight. I realized I had no other option. I grabbed a loose stone and raised it above my head. "I'll kill it. I'll kill your creation if you don't bring me mine," I screamed in a sickening primal selfishness. It sickened me because I suddenly knew I would. If I couldn't have Molly, then they couldn't have this thing. A sudden guttural screech emanated from the darkness, an inhuman metallic scream that sounded like 100 forks being dragged across a chalkboard. "I'll do it, you bastards," I yelled. The screams and cries of Molly from the cave seemed to sync with the abomination below me. "I'm going to give you till the count of 3, I said, my grip tightening on the rock. 1. Another hellish howl breaks from the dark. 2. The changeling looks up in a moment of terror. 3. A great crash of lightning strikes into a tree mere meters from where I was standing, blinding me with a light of sheer white for just a moment. As my vision clears, the rock still held aloft. I look down onto 2 green beady eyes. I immediately cast the rock aside and scooped Molly up into my arms. I don't know how long I sat there, quietly sobbing and whispering sweet comforts into Molly's ears. But as the rain began to soak through my outer layers, I got up and made my way home. I don't remember getting home at all, nor going to bed. All I remember is waking up on my sofa and Molly cradled in my arms. There were a few dying embers left in the fireplace. I could see the morning sun creeping through the gaps of my window shutters. For a brief, comforting moment, I thought I had just experienced the most terrible of dreams. However, this spell was shortly broken, as when I glanced to my table, a single porcelain eye stared back at me.